Hey, IBC Youth, miss you guys as always. Looking forward to seeing each other again real soon. And so this week, as we're going through the Gospel of John, we're going 3 chapters at a time through the last several weeks of quarantine here. I thought that would be a good idea as we go through Zoom and YouTube together. Went through John 1 through 3, 4 through 6. So now, guess what? This week is chapters 7 through 9. Got a lot of great stories in there about the life of Jesus, and I want to hone in on one particular story, and that comes from John chapter 8. So if you got a Bible, go ahead and grab it, open it. You should already be there waiting for us to go through John, but in John chapter 8, we have maybe a familiar story to a lot of you, and that is the woman who is caught in adultery, and we see that this person was forgiven. And so how do we handle people who, their sins are brought before Jesus? What does he do with them? What does he tell us? And what does he tell the religious elite? Okay, let's just read this passage together, and then we'll talk about certain verses together. All right, John chapter 8, verse 2. At dawn he went to the temple again, and all the people were coming to him. He sat down and began to teach them. Then the scribes and Pharisees brought a woman caught in adultery, making her stand in the center. "Teacher," they said to him, "this woman was caught in the act of committing adultery. In the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women. So what do you say?" They asked this to trap him in order that they might have evidence to accuse him. Jesus stooped down and started writing on the ground with his finger. Verse 7, look. When they persisted in questioning him, he stood up and said to them, "The one without sin among you should be the first to throw a stone at her." Then he stooped down again and continue writing on the ground. When they heard this, they left one by one, starting with the older men. Only he was left with the woman in the center. When Jesus stood up, he said to her, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" "No one, Lord," she answered. "Neither do I condemn you," Jesus said. "Go, and from now on, do not sin anymore." So that's John 8, 2 through 11. So, is there anyone without sin? Well, the short answer is no. You and I sin daily. How do we define sin? Well, the way that we could easily describe it to kids and to us would be this: the things that you do and say and think that are against God. Okay? So, let's go down to verse 3. Look at John 8, 3. Who are these teachers of the religious law and the Pharisees? Who are these guys? They were ordained teachers serving as representatives of Moses in interpreting the law, and so they acted as lawyers in legal case. They're the people who brought this woman caught in adultery, and I don't have to spell that out for you, that crime can't be committed alone. So why was only one person caught in the act brought before these temple courts here? Well, it's likely that the teachers of the law and the Pharisees staged this to trap Jesus. Look at verse 5. They said the law of Moses commands us to stone her. Well, yes, that's partially true, but Leviticus chapter 20 and Deuteronomy chapter 22 state that both parties should be put to death. So again, where is the man who was caught in adultery? Where is he? Did they let him go? And if they did, why? Again, most likely this was a trap. And since it was said that the woman was caught in the act, the man was also there, and so he should have been brought in as well. But again, as we said earlier, they're trying to trap Jesus. What are they trying to trap him? They're trying to trap him and accuse Jesus of speaking against the law of Moses. Look at verse 6. They were trying to trap him into saying something they could use against him. Okay, so if Jesus allowed stoning, he would be in violation of Roman law and would be considered even stricter than these Pharisees. If Jesus tried to release this woman, he could be faulted for ignoring the law of Moses. Now, it's kind of a lose-lose situation almost, right? I mean, it's kind of like when they approached Jesus in Matthew 22 and said, "Teacher, which is the greatest commandment?" Right? And he said, what? To love the Lord your God with all your heart and soul and strength. And the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. So, kind of caught in a little bit of a predicament here from the outside looking in. But what does Jesus say? Look at verse 7. "Let the one who has not sinned cast the first stone." These people ignored their own sins while using this woman to implicate Jesus. Okay, and Jesus has words of his own for people like this. If you look at Matthew chapter 7, towards the back end of Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, we see this famous judge not passage, right, from Matthew 7, 1 through 5. Right, he basically says, look, you're looking at a speck in somebody else's eye while ignoring the log in your own eye. Right, 1 John chapter 1 tells us that if we say we're without sin, we make God a liar, and his word is not in us. Right? So we have to admit that we are a sinful people. We do and say and think things that are against God. Romans 3:23 says we have all sinned and fallen short of God's glory. Remember that. So look at verse 9. Who left the scene first? Well, it said that began with the oldest of the teachers, the oldest of the Pharisees and these religious teachers. Why would the oldest walk away first? Probably because they had more wisdom and experience to recognize their own sins and faults. And Jesus does not condone this woman's sin, okay? Far from it. But here we're reminded of Jesus' words from John 3:17, right? That the reason that Jesus came into the world was to save it, not to condemn it. The woman had came face to face with condemnation and shame and death, but she was pardoned by the one to whom all judgment had been given. Right? Jesus has all authority in heaven and on earth to judge, to save. He's got all that authority, but here he pardons this one who was caught in sin. And what is his response to her? No one has condemned you, neither do I, but go and sin no more. He's not saying go on and keep on living your lifestyle. He's saying, okay, learn from this moment. Now go and sin no more. And he calls people from the 1st century to the 21st century today, he calls people to die to self and sin and to live in obedience to the will of the Father. You know, people can't claim God's mercy and then live a lifestyle that's in opposition to his will. We can't say that we're a saved people and that we're Christians and that we love the Lord, yet still deliberately keep on sinning. It just doesn't work that way. We don't call that grace. That would be further than even cheap grace, okay? Paul says in Romans 6 that the grace that we have that's been given to us by Jesus is not to be abused, right? There's no condemnation for those in Christ Jesus, we know from Romans 8, but shall we continue in sin so that grace may abound? Absolutely not, by no means. So, what stuck out to you in your reading from John 7 through 9 this week? I'd like to hear from you. Leave me a comment, shoot me a text. Let me know what stuck out to you from John 7 through 9 this week. If you didn't get a chance to get around to that reading, go read it. Go listen to it on the Bible app, or, there's plenty of ways for you guys to connect. I gave you guys a life book in the bags, and you've got one of those. You've got your own Bible. You got the YouVersion Bible app. Takes maybe 15 minutes to read John 7 through 9. So read through it if you didn't get a chance to. Read John 10, 11, and 12 in advance for next Wednesday, and I'll talk to y'all next Wednesday. Looking forward to it, guys. See you soon.